Many thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. So it's officially my 4-year anniversary since my time in the corporate world came to an end and my experiment into becoming a full-time photographer began. And I still can't wrap my head around what I figured would be a 12-month experiment that has somehow blossomed into a 4-year career. And you know, the past few years have been one of the most wild rides imaginable for me, filled with loads of pressure and ups and downs and just doing my best to keep up with everything. And I couldn't be more thankful for the journey and the way things worked out for me. And I really do appreciate you being a part of it as well. And for those that have been subscribed to the channel for a while now, know that many of my videos speak to a former version of myself. And this week's episode is no different at all, as these are the 7 things that I never heard of when I was first starting out 8 years ago, but have learned and really grown to appreciate over time, and have now become standard practice for myself when on location. Now, these 7 things are not in any specific order whatsoever, but the very first item is something that I simply call edit planning. And what edit planning is when you're on location, you know, you're going through your composition, you're going through your standard on location workflow, and you're refining everything. But while you're making all your adjustments, and while you're searching for compositions and refining it, and you know, doing your edge patrol around your scene just to make sure that there's no distracting elements sticking into the corners of your photograph, thinking about the way that you're going to post-process that photograph. Now, I heard about this quite a few years ago. I shouldn't say quite a few years ago, just a few years ago, and it seemed kind of odd to me. But once I started to actually put it into practice, it kind of started to click a little bit, and it helped me not only when I was on location, but it also helped me in the actual post-processing process as well. And I got a couple good examples here from my recent trip to the Blue Ridge Mountains. So this is an image that I captured, like I said, a few weeks ago. I just posted this on Instagram last week, and this is the final edited version, and then this is the raw file here. So this is the final edit in the raw file. And looking at it, you might not really see a big difference here. But when I was on location, I had that type of an edit in mind. I knew that I wanted to make the tree stand out a little bit. I knew I wanted to do a little bit of dodging and burning, brightening the highlight areas of the tree trunk, darkening the darker areas of the tree trunk to kind of give that wraparound feel, a little bit of that 3D effect, while at the same time darkening down the edges, just really making the subject stand out. And I'm really happy to say that, you know, this was, like I said, this is the raw file, and then this is the finished version. And I think I really accomplished that. Here's another example here from that same trip. This is the final edited version. I haven't shared this photograph yet. I don't know how excited I am about it, but I think it's a good example of this edit planning. This is the final version, and this is the raw file. So this is the final edit, and this is the raw file. And when I was on location, I liked this rock right here and how it was kind of pointing into this rock right here. And of course, all the ethereal fog and everything that was kind of moving through. But this was a very messy scene. And I knew that I wanted to darken this whole area down. I knew I wanted to add a gradient filter all the way through here. And that's exactly what I did. And I wanted this light here just to be kind of illuminating the back sides of these rocks and these trunks through here. Kind of warmed up that fog just a little bit. But thinking about that edit while I was on location really helped me not only to frame it up, but once again, during the post-processing process. Keep saying that, the editing process, let's go with that term. Now, the next thing is something that I simply call storytelling. Now, storytelling, you know, you could ask 10 photographers what they feel about storytelling or how they go about it, and you might get 10 different answers. One of the most beneficial ways for me to focus on storytelling is by creating sets of images. This is from a trip a few weeks ago, but this right here, I don't think any of these images by themselves are that fantastic. But when you put the 3 together, I think this creates a nice set of photographs. I think this creates a nice story, and this kind of really tells of the day of this particular location. Hot, humid, this is kind of what this image feels like. You got these gnats or flies or some type of insect sitting on these this mushroom, and then you got a little bit of dew on this blade of grass right through here. And all of these images together, I think, tell an interesting story. But like I said, just one of those images standing alone, I don't think really conveys that. Now, the third item is something that I call observe the light. Now, observe the light seems very generic. It seems very obvious, but I can't tell you how many times I've been on location and I get a composition all framed up, but I'm not paying attention to the light. I'm paying attention to the subject and only the subject. And the light is over here, or the light is over there, or the light is behind me. But I completely disregard that. I just focus completely on my composition. And sometimes you can create a great photograph, but from my experience, You can have the best composition in the world with the best subject in the world. But if the light is bad or there's no light at all, you're just going to be left with kind of a just a okay photograph. To me, light is just so imperative for a great image. And this is a good example here from maybe 3 or 4 years ago. There was just really nothing going on at this location at all. I forgot exactly where it was. I was on this kind of cliffside and there was just really nothing super interesting. And I kind of shifted my attention away from trying to come up with this grand composition, and I just looked for interesting light. I was looking for contrasting light, areas of interesting shadow versus areas of interesting light. And I captured this image here, and I really liked the way this came out. This is not an interesting subject at all. This is just literally looking off of a cliff down into this valley. If you take the light away, there's nothing here, but it was all about the light for me. And in this image here from Yosemite, or not from Yosemite Valley, I'm sorry, from the Smoky Mountains from a few months ago, once again, the subject is not super exciting here. It's not super exciting, or I just said that twice. The subject isn't anything to write home about. And the light, though, is absolutely fantastic. It creates this very ethereal, it's a backlit scene, and it just creates this kind of just hazy, just to me, very moody atmosphere. But if you take that light away, this image is just of a bunch of trees in a valley. So just observing the light and seeing what the light is doing, I think is absolutely fantastic. And when you don't get so locked into the subject that you went to a location to photograph, or you don't get so locked into the composition you feel is the best one, and you start to just pay attention to where the light is, and sometimes the light is not where you want it to be, and maybe you have to, change your idea or change your game plan and kind of photograph what that light is. But just being a student of the light, I think is very important. Now, this next one is something that I have really been focused on the last few years, and it's honestly, in my opinion, has changed my photography. And it's something that I call small details that make a big difference. Small details that make a big difference. And basically what that is just focusing on the smaller scenes. This right here is just waves interacting with this sea stack. And I found it to be absolutely mesmerizing just watching these waves. And I just captured the same composition over and over and over. And I really like the way that this one came out. But this is such a tiny portion of this massive scene on the coast of California. And this was not what I went to this location to photograph at all. But this is one of the images I'm most proud of, because the conditions were not great at all the entire 3 days that I was at this location. And this scene right here is something that I really enjoy. There's no sky involved in it at all. The light was so flat, but this scene right here, I don't believe needs any kind of super interesting dynamic light. It's got just enough light illuminating the splash right here just to kind of light it up so you can see a little bit of these striations in the water crashing across the sea stack. And it was just enough to pull this off. Once again, this is just a leaf. But I personally, I don't know about you, I don't look at leaves this close. And I was honestly pretty surprised when I didn't have a macro lens or anything like that. I just got as close as my lens would focus on this leaf. And I captured it and I went home and I processed it. And I was blown away by all the detail and the striations on this leaf. And those are kind of the small details that make a big difference. Once again, I think I've shared this image before, but a geothermal hot spring in Iceland, where when you look at this photograph, you really have no idea the overall scale of this scene. This hot spring could be absolutely massive. And this image kind of plays a trick on you a little bit. And I really enjoy that momentary sense of confusion that this photograph creates. But in all actuality, this little tiny hot spring was nothing more than a little hole in the ground. And I just flew a drone a couple feet above it and captured this image. And I think that this is a fantastic example of small details that make a big difference. And I think when you start shifting your focus away from the grand scene, or maybe you're only focused on telephoto shots or whatever you're normally focused on, kind of shift that attention toward the small details. Because when, as landscape and outdoor photographers, we're photographing the great outdoors. But a lot of times you get so fixated on the big scene, what it looks like in totality. But there are so many small things that are happening that if you don't identify them or if you don't focus on them, they completely get lost in translation and you really don't even see them. Now, the next thing is something that I call work the scene. And work the scene, this is fun. This is a little bit to do kind of like storytelling, I guess. But this is a great example right here. Working the scene, moving in different angles, using different objects you see. I saw this log here pointing up to the waterfall, so I wanted to try and play around with different leading lines with that. Shifting over to the left, going back to the log, moving, getting a little bit lower to the ground, including this tree here, getting lower, even lower to the ground and shifting over, moving to the left more to include more of this tree. Then there was this big giant boulder right here to include a little bit of that. Getting even lower because I like the triangular shapes that were created right here by the outflow of this water. Doing a vertical orientation, different vertical orientations, shifting a little bit lower, and I figured that the landscape orientation was the version that I liked, and really, really working the scene. And the final image that I ended up with was right here. But it took a lot of trial and error to figure this one out. And when I was on location, I did not know that this was going to be my favorite one. But I was working the scene as best as I could. I knew I wanted to get 10, 15, 20 variations of this waterfall if I had to have as much information when I get back home that I can figure out exactly which one I think is best. But having that mindset to really, really work the scene. If you ever watch a wedding photographer or a portrait photographer, they really, really work the scene. They work the subject. But taking that same thought track, that same aspect, and putting it towards outdoor and landscape photography, I find to be very, very beneficial. Just one more quick example of this, of the front of this waterfall, all these different variations. And this is the one I ended up with. But what's so funny, as when I was preparing for this video, I found this image right here that I kind of skipped over when I captured this. But now, as you can see, I 5-starred it. I really, really like the way this one turned out. But a couple years ago, this is the one that I thought was the best one. But taking many different variations, and this, when I was talking about earlier, how this is kind of goes along with storyboards. Storyboards is kind of the same idea where you want to capture a lot of different variety of a particular scene. And then when you get home, you figure out what are the best 2 or the best 3 that tells the story of that location. Maybe create a set of images. Same kind of thing happens when you really work the scene because you get a ton of variety. And then when you get home, you figure out which one you think is best. And you'd be surprised how often the composition you like the most when you're on location is not the one that is your favorite when you get home to start to kind of review those photographs. So really, really working the scene. Now, this next thing is something that I call simply just revisiting a location. And it's something that I never, ever used to do. And I get it. When you're kind of, a hobbyist and you're kind of getting started with outdoor photography, you don't have all the time in the world. A lot of times your trips kind of coincide with family vacations. And this is a good example of this. This was a family vacation from a few years ago. And I didn't have a ton of time. I didn't want to take family time away, but I came to this location, I think 3 or 4 sunsets in a row, trying to get the reflection in this pond, or trying to get the water perfectly still, because the entire time I was there, it was very windy. But on my very last attempt at this location, I got just, I don't know, maybe a half an hour of very, very calm conditions, and I was able to capture this photograph. And this is one of my favorite images of Yosemite Falls. No, the sky is not super exciting. I do wish it was a little bit more exciting, a little bit better. There was a little bit more drama, a little bit more interest right through here. But the reflection, I think, is absolutely fantastic. But revisiting locations, and I know it's kind of hard to do sometimes. You go to a location and you think you got some okay conditions and you get a photograph you're kind of happy with, and that's it. And you kind of go away. But revisiting a location is something that I think, full-time photographers, professional photographers do all the time. And it's something that I have been doing much more often the last few years. And it has paid dividends in my photography. But I totally understand that when this is not your job and you're kind of getting started and it's just a hobby, a lot of times you don't have the ability to go to the same location over and over again, but it definitely can pay off. And then the last thing is just patience and persistence. And this goes along with revisiting a location, but I'm not the most, I don't know, I'm a fairly patient person, I guess. But when I first started to kind of get into landscape photography, I would find a composition and I would rush it a little bit. I would be like, okay, that's good enough. I can fix it in post. I had that mentality. And I would wait for the kind of light to get okay and be like, okay, this is good enough. I'm hungry, or I'm ready to go home, and I would leave. I didn't have the patience. And now I am way more patient than ever. I'll find a composition, or I'll spend just an endless amount of time perfecting a composition. And I will stay at a location for hours or even days to get the shot that I'm looking for, and being very persistent and revisiting locations. These last 2 things really, really go together. but revisiting locations, having that patience, having that persistence will definitely pay off. And I think it really did in this particular situation, because every image I captured of this location over those 4 days that I was there, none of them looked remotely as good as this. And it was all because the reflection, getting those calm conditions was absolutely imperative to get this kind of this crystal clear reflection in this water. And I absolutely love the way that this one turned out. So those are the 7 things that I never did when I was first getting started. And I do now. And over time, over the last 8 years, I have learned to do these things much more often, and they have really paid dividends in my photography, and I hope it will help you out as well. Now, before I do wrap up this week's video, I just want to say a huge thanks to the sponsor of this week's video, which is Squarespace, who I use for all of my website and e-commerce needs. Squarespace provides a dynamic and attractive online platform to create your website. You can display your photography using Squarespace's professional portfolio designs and customize the layout and look and feel of your gallery just so you can make it your own. With Squarespace's traffic overview feature, you can track trends in page visits and views to better optimize your content, and you can even grow and engage with your customers with Squarespace's email campaign tools, which will enable you to create engaging emails that match your website with your products or blog post and logo, just so your messaging remains consistent. So if you're looking to start a new website or possibly upgrade your current website, check out squarespace.com/Mark Denney for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase. So I do hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you have any questions about it at all, just please leave me a comment in the comment section below, and I will do my best to get back in touch with you. And I hope, like I said, I hope you enjoy it. As always, you guys know, I do hope you enjoy the video. I wouldn't make these videos if I didn't think you would enjoy them, or if I didn't think that you would find them beneficial. But like I said, to kick this video off, I'm always creating videos that I would have found beneficial 8 years ago. I'm always creating videos that would speak to a former version of myself. So Mark Denney, 8 years ago, 7 years ago, or 6 years ago, is this something that he would find beneficial? And a lot of times I find, actually all the time, all of the videos that I make are videos that I would have found beneficial back then. And that's kind of where I come up with all of my video ideas. So I really do hope that this one resonates with you this week. If you enjoyed the video, like it, subscribe to the channel, share the video with your friends if you enjoyed it that much. And I will put some playlists right here that you can check out based on composition, or maybe it's gear. It's all focused on landscape photography. You want to check on any of those out, please do. Thanks again for taking some time out of your day to spend it with me, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Bye.